Clare Daly has question number 5.
Thanks, Curragh. Minister, obviously this is an issue which we've discussed many times and relates to the accommodation units in the Curragh Camp and has to be seen against the backdrop of the court action and indeed pressure being put on what is deemed to be overholders by the Department of Defence to remove those families from their homes. Now, you're aware that my colleague Deputy Wallace offered to examine those properties from a professional point of view using his expertise in that regard. You instead chose to commission a technical examination, which nonetheless we were grateful for. I'm wondering where that technical examination of those properties is at the moment.
Thank you,
where is it at, and what are the plans for the families involved?
Minister, number 5.
I just want to thank the Deputy for that question. As the Deputy says, my department has recently undertaken an assessment of vacant former married quarter properties within the Curragh Camp with a view to their potential for future military use as single living-in accommodation. The properties in question comprise a terrace of 16 houses and are typical of the types of former married quarters accommodation vacant in the Curragh. 3 of the houses have over time been reconfigured by combining adjacent houses, with the result that there are now 13 individual units in the terrace overall. The terrace is a solid brick structure with a slate roof. The majority of the houses comprise 2 bedrooms, a kitchen and a sitting room. There is a small toilet located at the rear of each house on the ground floor, but there are no bathroom facilities. The assessment indicates that in order to be viable for accommodation use, adjacent properties would have to be combined to give a smaller number of larger units. However, the assessment also indicates that the properties are in a very poor state of repair, that the estimated cost of repairs necessary to make them suitable as accommodation is simply prohibitive. While the outcome of the assessment is still under consideration, it's clear that any renovation would be very costly, would only deliver 8 to 9 viable units, and will be very limited in terms of future military needs. This is not a cost-effective solution to meeting accommodation needs in the Curragh.
Well, this is a radical turnaround from what the Minister stated in the House previously. The figures are that there are about 101 units of accommodation in the Curragh Camp, and our understanding clearly was that the technical assessment would be undertaken into all of those 100 dwellings, not 16 units in a terrace. And I think if that's all that the technical assessment has looked at, then the Minister has been engaged in a little bit of, I don't know, sleight of hand or whatever, because that wasn't the understanding of this side of the House or indeed the residents involved. We can't divorce this situation from the overall housing crisis that is out there and the savings to the state of remediating what are otherwise quite solid units compared to having to rebuild homes for, in essence, 100 units. Now, I would like to see the technical assessment so far. The Minister has given us very little detail, but he's been incredibly dismissive of the findings. And I think to level the playing field and to have our experts look at the situation, I would ask the Minister to furnish us now with the interim findings and to explain where the other 87 units have disappeared off the radar that you were supposed to be looking at.
Minister.
It's my understanding, Deputy, that what was undertaken was a review of these particular units to get some insight into the possible benefits of undertaking renovation works and the likely difficulties that will be encountered. And I'm told that in the context of the particular group of terraced houses that were examined, the estimated cost of works is in the region of €863,000, VAT inclusive. In relation to the terrace of 16 houses, that would give an average cost per house of 53,937 units. 53,937 euros if you could preserve 16 houses. But on the basis of the survey that was undertaken and it being concluded that out of the 16 terraced houses ultimately there'd only be 9 viable units produced from the renovations, this would put the cost per unit at €95,888. And these aren't costs that I could stand over in the context of this particular of a particular proposal.
Thank you, Mr.
Now, I have no difficulty because this was an initial assessment. I have no difficulty asking if there are buildings in a better state of repair, whether there's at less cost, works will be carried out. My understanding is this terrace was used as a prototype of the difficulties that exist and the type of structures that are there to get some sense of the cost involved. And that's the costing I've been given.
Well, again, could I say I would like to see the full report so far, even based on the figures that the Minister gave. It is not an excessive amount to pay for a dwelling house in the current climate, and I don't think that we can divorce this scenario from the housing crisis that is in existence in this state, not least in terms of Kildare County Council, where there are thousands on the housing waiting list, and the state is going to have to foot the bill for that. And the idea of developing an accommodation unit for €54,000, or I thought the Minister said in his earlier answer that it wasn't 16, it was 13. Somehow it's gone down to 9 within that. But to be honest, even 90,000 is not excessive. You wouldn't build a house from scratch for that anywhere else. And I again ask the Minister, can we see the technical assessment of those properties so that we consider it? And could the Minister shed some light on where he sees the families who are currently residing in those units and some of the other 100 viable properties in that area? What is going to become of them?
Thank you, Deputy. Final
well, on the last issue the Deputy raised, I have said previously, and given the Deputy some detail which I won't repeat, that the individual circumstances of families in particular houses are taken into account, and the Deputy is aware of that, because there are individuals who I referenced, I think, last day when we raised this issue in the Chamber, who are described as overholders in the technical sense, who have been living in some of these houses for very, very many years, and there are very elderly individuals who, as the Deputy is aware, there isn't an intention ultimately to discommode them, but they're not in lawful possession of the properties. But no one Deputy is going to be rendered homeless on the basis of the manner in which we deal with these matters. But in the context of dealing with the wider housing issue, yes, there's a significant wider housing issue. And as I've said to the Deputy, as a government, we're very conscious of this.
Thank you, Minister.
Indeed, Minister State Jan O'Sullivan is doing what she can to address that issue. But sadly and unfortunately, because of the financial position of the state, there isn't an open-ended amount of money that can be made available to address this as comprehensively as all of us would like to see it addressed.
Thank you, Minister.